The catch is in. And for these fishermen, it's better than it has been in years. Not long ago, they were blockaded by China's naval forces, prevented from accessing a traditional Philippine fishing ground rich in resources, known to them as the Scarborough Shoal.
It's difficult to be fishing nearby the shore. We need to go further into the Scarborough Shoal to be able to have enough for our family and needs.
Carding is preparing for another trip. He says life was harder for people in this community before China lifted some territorial restrictions late last year.
Suddenly, what was ours was no longer ours. But now, everything is okay. At first, it was hard, but we're hoping things continue as they are.
The Scarborough Shoal has been a source of abundance for this fishing community for generations. And even though they currently have access, there are still concerns over China's ambitions for expansion, something which could mean further limitations and even danger for fishermen like Carding. The shoal is a small ring of reefs that lies just 230 kilometers from the Philippines and 650 kilometers from the nearest Chinese landmass of Hainan. It is just one of the disputed territories in the South China Sea. China's so-called Nine-Dash Line marks the extent of its claim, to the dismay of Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and the Philippines. It's why many critics of Beijing's reach say smaller states with a claim need to present a united front.
And I'm very happy that they are sincere and they are really they're there to comply with their commitments to us.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has shied away from applying pressure on China over the issue. It's a policy reversal from the previous government, which had pursued a ruling against China by an international arbitration tribunal.
A lot of senior officials within the government were saying that, the Philippines secured a landmark arbitration case against China that nullified almost the entirety of China's claims across the South China Sea. That could have served as a precursor for additional arbitration cases against China. So with Duterte saying that I'm gonna set it aside, he has essentially killed the momentum.
In what was seen as an effort to quiet his critics, Duterte has said Beijing warned him of a potential war if he pressed a hard line on the disputed territories.
I think what Duterte is trying to do is just to focus more on domestic security concerns, on his war on drugs. So he's just saying we cannot have two fights at the same time on two fronts.
For us, the president's tactics were effective in terms of coming to an agreement with the Chinese. But of course, what we really want in the long run is that they no longer are present in this area. Because while they are still there, we are living in fear.
But for those who depend on these once troubled waters, they hope they can stay calm. And that at the end of the day, they can simply bring home their catch. Randolph Noble, the newsmakers in Quito on the Philippines' west coast.
Well, for more, I'm joined from Manila by Senator Richard Gordon. He is the chairman of the Philippines Red Cross. And from Washington, D.C., we have Abigail Ballard. She's an Asia analyst for the Center for American Progress. Thanks both so much for joining us. Senator Gordon, let me start with you. You've said before that Duterte's foreign policy, read the United States and China, is very short-sighted. Why?
I don't think I said it in that context. I always believe that our foreign policy should always have the long view of making sure that we adhere to an independent foreign policy and that no country should dictate to us, and that we should always defend our national territory, our national sovereignty, and our national interests, as well as our right to self-determination. Now, in the case of China, China is a big neighbor to us, and we must learn to handle it in a way that we preserve our integrity, our national territory, and make sure that they know that we're going to stand by our basic national interests. From the standpoint of the Philippines with the United States, we've had a long relationship with America, but so far the relationship in history has been one of primus inter pares, with the Americans getting the first and the Filipinos getting the equals. In other words, it has never been a consistent policy where the treatment of the Philippines by America has been different in the way it treated its other allies that it fought with, that we fought with the United States, for the United States, and for freedom against the Japanese, for example, and even in the case of Korea. So we have to really balance out our foreign policy in that sense.
Okay, Senator, but let me just get clear here. Earlier, when you'd said that the policy is short-sighted, you said that Duterte's government was actually looking toward China to help solve domestic problems at the cost of causing potentially bigger problems later, particularly in the Philippines' relationship with the United States.
Well, it's short-sighted in the sense that we may be getting some aid from China or some good loans from China that are liberal. But in the long run, we have to watch out that the aid or the support that China is giving us, we must realize that they're not giving it without being transactional. They're hoping that we are going to keep quiet on our claims insofar as the Spratlys is concerned. But we do know that we have a neighbor, and that although they have good intentions, we know what they're capable of. And in that sense, the thing that we need to do is make sure that our allies like the United States, like Japan, and maybe Australia and Korea, try to get together so that we could balance off China's very, very ambitious thrust towards controlling the West Philippine Sea, where more than $3 trillion worth of business go there every year, where most of the oil coming from the Middle East come through there, and it's therefore important that right away, to be able to get into that situation, the Philippines must start making sure that our economy improves so we can buy ourselves an armed force that can defend ourselves, that can defend our country, with the support of other nations.
Okay, but Senator, as we heard that analyst saying in the report we just listened to, while you say that the Philippines will protect its own interests, in that report we heard that analyst say that essentially Duterte set aside a landmark arbitration case that actually ruled against China in the South China Sea, essentially killing the momentum that would have benefited the Philippines. How is that working in the interest of the Philippines then?
Oh, if you're talking about our victory in The Hague with respect to our territory, I don't think we're giving up that claim. It's just that we have to make sure that America will also defend us. We have a mutual defense treaty with the United States, but it will also be subject to its own internal rules, which means it's not automatic. And in our case, we will maintain our claim in the Spratlys. Maybe we will not pursue it in the manner that we can pursue it at that time. If we had the armed forces capability, we will continue to talk with China so as to be able to make sure that we get a better purchase on peace and very, very cordial relations with our biggest neighbor.
Okay.
And by the way, our biggest trading partner as well.
Certainly. Abigail, let me turn to you then. Do you think current foreign policy, as dictated by the Philippines government at present, really does work best for the Philippines' long-term interests?
I agree with Senator Gordon when he says there's a transactional element to the Philippines' relationship with China. If by backing off of the South China Sea, hopefully, Chinese aid will flow into the Philippines, but it's unclear if, 10, 20 years down the line, will these territorial claims increase? Will this be in the Philippines' best interests? I think it is potentially on the short-sighted side.
Do you agree with the analyst that said that essentially Duterte has killed the momentum of that ruling against China under international arbitration in the South China Sea?
I think it has certainly hurt the momentum. I think we've seen that in the most recent ASEAN meeting, there has been an agreement to go forward creating a code of conduct for what to do in the South China Sea. But I think the Philippines, who won this victory, backing off is harmful for keeping that momentum going, especially when, for example, a lot of the Philippines' neighbors in the South Pacific are also dealing with the same the same balance of do we accept Chinese aid in exchange for not pursuing claims against South China's territorial claims.
Okay, Senator Gordon, let me ask you, how much do you think your government should care right now about the interests of the fishing communities, particularly that we saw in the report we just played there? How much do they matter?
I don't think we're going to compromise anything insofar as national territory is concerned. I draw a red line, for example, on the Spratlys, on the Scarborough Shoals, I'm sorry. But certainly, ASEAN wants to make sure that there is a code of conduct that will be established in ASEAN to prevent unnecessary tensions. And of course, in line with that, we have to make sure that our allies, like the United States, will maintain its support for this code of conduct because it benefits the whole world, not just ASEAN. But since we're closer to China, we have to bear very, very hard on China's intentions, on China's capability, and that is a great deal to do with the part of the answer that we have to give with respect to anything that they would do in this past. Certainly, we're not going to give up our territory.
Okay, then help me better understand how much your government is willing to compromise on its close relationship with the United States, a long-term bond that the Philippines has had with the U.S., in order to favor your relationship with China.
Well, I don't think that we're giving up anything insofar as the United States is concerned. Remember that we have over 4 million Filipinos in the United States. We have had a long history with the United States. We have fought wars together with the United States. And I don't think we're giving them up. And even now, America is aiding us. China is also trying to aid us, trying into our good graces, because it is seeking to make sure that they are able to get their claim established, a historic claim, which has been destroyed by our legal claim in The Hague. And so therefore, we're sticking to that claim. Now, obviously, we would like to maintain close relationships with our biggest trading partner as well. And we don't have to choose between the two of them. We can deal with the situation as they come, and we're not trying to be pragmatic. We've been a loyal ally insofar as our fight for democracy and freedom, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we can adequately protect ourselves by making sure that our allies will come to our assistance should we get into trouble. We're not sure of that, and that is why it is better to maintain an independent foreign policy where we try not to assuage China, but to engage China in a dialogue, in a conversation that will show them that our interests are purely to be friendly to all our countries around us, to the countries around us, so that we can continue a zone of peace, friendship, and amity in this part of the world.
Okay, Abigail, let me ask you to kind of take a step back and tell us, where do the Philippines most need the alliances that best protect the Philippines' interests?
Well, I think right now one of the big issues is the violent Muslim insurgency in Mindanao and Marawi, and I think really only the United States has the defense and intelligence capabilities to assist the Philippines to the extent that it needs domestic assistance. I think China is coming in almost purely on the economic side, whereas the United States has this defense alliance in addition to providing also development money and diplomatic assistance.
And so how do you think the Philippines should be acting? Do you think right now the balance is correct?
I think that Duterte's statements about his views towards the United States are very troubling. I think the United States will continue to support the Philippines, especially as they try to counter violent extremism. But I also think the United States will have to be careful about making sure that they don't support directly or indirectly Philippine programs that do validate China's claims in the South China Sea. And the United States will have to be careful about making sure that its money is helping, the Philippine domestic issues without giving sovereignty to China implicitly or explicitly in places where China doesn't have sovereignty.
Okay, Senator Gordon, I'll let you respond to that before we go.
Well, we're not going to give up any claim to our sovereignty, and we're not going to allow China to bully us. But we don't have to have that kind of reaction all the time. We have to find out whether China is indeed trying to be friendly to us. We know what their interests are. We know what our interests are, and we're trying to work with them so that there could be mutuality of aims that can be achieved. But if we cannot do that, then we draw the line on our national territory because
But what about
that is
your
in our
need for
Constitution.
U.S.
We have to
support,
defend our national
especially
territory.
the need you have for U.S. support, especially fighting the militant movements in the south of the Philippines?
Well, of course, we need the support of the U.S. military. They have been there supporting us even before what happened in Marawi. They don't have soldiers fighting, but they do have soldiers that are training our Filipinos to fly at night, to get extra electronic intelligence, and even to a certain extent get us some more equipment so that we can find adequately the ISIS-inspired uprising in Marawi. And this is to the interest of America because they're doing so that ISIS will not grow here, so that it can affect America ultimately in other places, including the United States.
Okay. Richard Gordon, we'll let you have the final word there. I'd like to thank you and Abigail Bard so much for joining us on this edition of the Newsmakers.